Freedom Channel, it's our time with a review of the week's top news. In the studio, Mikhail Braille. Hello. Ukraine is finally severing its ties with the CIS. At the initiative of the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry, the government has terminated 116 treaties concluded with Russia, Belarus, and within the Commonwealth of Independent States. According to Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, the main stage of bringing Ukraine's treaty base into line with the realities of war is effectively being completed. I should note that Ukraine ceased its participation in the statutory bodies of the CIS back in 2018, but formally remained a party to a number of interstate agreements.
It is my firm conviction that Ukraine's legal and treaty framework must reflect the realities of war and the new security architecture on the European continent. To do this, we must sever the last legal threads that once tied us to the Russian Federation, Belarus, and the so-called CIS. This is my fundamental position as minister: to get rid of everything that could weaken Ukraine, to cut off everything that once united us with the aggressor state, and to build a serious, strategic, and long-term line of defense for the free world on Ukraine's eastern border, or better yet, even further beyond it. Andriy Sybiha, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ukraine.
Europe must independently produce all types of air defense systems and missiles for them. Volodymyr Zelensky stated this while addressing the leaders of the Joint Expeditionary Force Summit. The meeting's taken place in Helsinki. The president added that European countries need to unite and strengthen their shared experience, particularly in the areas of infrastructure, energy, maritime, and cyberspace. But the highest priority, according to Zelensky, still remains air defense.
We in Europe need to have the full capacity to produce all types of air defense systems and missiles for them, specifically means of protection against drones, cruise missiles, and ballistics. And we cannot rely on the military-industrial complex of other partners. We must be confident in our base here in Europe. Please, let's continue the work and accelerate it. And while we are building up this potential, please remember that we need protection from Russian missiles every day. And I am grateful to those of you who actively support us within the framework of Pearl. This is very important.
American weapons under the Pearl program will continue to be supplied to Ukraine, despite the needs of the war in the Middle East. This refers to both air defense systems and missiles for them. This was stated by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte during the presentation of his report for the past year. What other important statements were made at the Alliance headquarters will be reported by Freedom TV's special correspondent in Europe, Vitaly Sizov. Vitaly, good afternoon. Tell us the details of this meeting. What do you manage to find out?
Mikhail, well, perhaps the main statement, which was basically expected, the head of NATO once again repeated that Russia represents the most serious threat to the North Atlantic Alliance, for this North Atlantic region. And according to the head of NATO, this view is shared by all 32 countries that are part of the alliance. We have a quote from him.
Russia remains the most significant and direct threat to the security, peace, and stability of the Euro-Atlantic region. Over the past year, Russia has sought to test our security, to destabilize and divide our societies through airspace violations, sabotage, and malicious cyber activities, as well as political interference and information threats.
The head of NATO noted that the alliance has been successful in countering Russia. Specifically, he mentioned the Eastern Guard and Baltic Guard programs. This is a response to harmful actions, malicious activities against alliance member states, primarily on the eastern flank of NATO countries. The Secretary General of NATO also emphasized that the alliance remains the most significant and primary supporter of Ukraine, its most essential strategic ally, providing the largest volume of aid in this ongoing conflict, because, as the head of NATO said, the security of the alliance is also the security of Ukraine as well.
We continue to provide crucial support to Ukraine. Our security is closely linked to this. That is why, in 2025, allies provided Ukraine with the vast majority of military aid. This was in addition to ongoing humanitarian support and other forms of non-lethal assistance.
Mark Rutte denied reports published by some media outlets that the situation in the Middle East has somehow affected aid to Ukraine. Based on the information he provided, the Pearl program for the supply of American weapons to Ukraine is continuing to operate exactly as it has in the past. And Ukraine also continues to receive billions of dollars in high grade military equipment. We have a direct quote from him.
Deliveries of equipment vital to Ukraine, including interceptors, are ongoing. Furthermore, I would like to add that since its launch last summer, the Pearl Initiative has delivered approximately 75% of all missiles for Ukraine's Patriot batteries, and in addition to that, 90% of the ammunition used in other air defense systems. So this is an exceptionally vital program, and deliveries are continuing.
The head of NATO also mentioned the work of the Joint Center for Studying Ukraine's experience in Poland, as well as the operations of the Joint Command in Wiesbaden. He spoke highly of the contribution these two NATO elements have made towards supporting Ukraine. So the main takeaway from this press conference, this interaction with the media, and the report is that NATO's primary goals in assisting Ukraine remain unchanged. The alliance still views Ukraine as the main threat. The alliance continues to view investments in Ukraine's defense as investments in its own security. And also, what's most important for Ukraine right now is that the deliveries of American air defense components are continuing as planned. That's all the information for now from here at NATO headquarters. Mikhail?
Thank you, colleague, for that detailed information. Joining us live from Brussels was Vitaly Sizov, a special correspondent for the Freedom TV channel in Europe. And he spoke about the key statements made during NATO's annual report. This time, the head was reporting on the past year. In particular, he stated that the Russian Federation continues to be the main threat to all Europe. And moving on to other news. Last night, the Russian army launched 153 drones at Ukraine. About 100 of them were sheds. These figures were released by the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Ukrainian air defense managed to neutralize 130 targets. Hits by 16 drones were recorded at 11 locations. 10 people were injured in a Russian strike on Kharkiv. This morning, Russian troops attacked the Slobitsky district of the city. A drone fell between a restaurant and a residential high-rise building. According to local authorities, a wounded 65-year-old man was hospitalized. Medics provided assistance to the other victims on the spot. As a result of the strike, a fire broke out in the restaurant and windows were blown out in nearby high-rises. And besides that, cars were damaged. 5 people were injured as a result of an attack by Russian strike drones on Dnipro. One of them hit the corner apartments of a 4-story building directly. Rescuers helped the people who were in that entrance to get outside. More details on the consequences of the attack in Natalia Gusak's report.
I started cleaning up near the mirror and I found it near the armchair.
Elena found this metal fragment next to the bed. She says it's a miracle she wasn't in the room that took the brunt of the shockwave. She left for the hospital in the morning, but at that time she might not have even gotten out of bed, which is now covered in glass. The woman says her 75-year-old mother was at home at that moment.
She heard the buzzing sound of the very first shahad and immediately hurried out into the hallway. Nothing happened. She came back, checked her blood pressure. It was 190/90. And then she heard that it was buzzing again. She grabbed her things, her emergency bag, and went into the hallway. And it's a good thing she got out in time, because if she had hesitated, fragments would have flown from those windows.
Not a single window was left intact in the woman's apartment, but the residents themselves were not hurt. Olga was also at home at the moment of the strike. She says she didn't even have time to hide in the hallway.
It's very scary. I can't describe it. The shahed was already descending, and there was such a terrible whistle. I ducked down, thinking, I don't know where to run. I ducked, and just then I heard a powerful impact. Glass was flying right at me. The curtains covered it a bit, heavy curtains. They held back the glass.
A shahed hit the corner entrance of a 4-story building. A fire broke out on the 2nd and 3rd floors. 5 people were injured, ranging in age from 55 to 90 years old. There is no threat to their lives, medics say. Apartments that were at the epicenter of the explosion are completely destroyed. In the rest, and that's more than 50, the windows were blown out. Several dozen cars were damaged in the corridor.
Right now, rescue workers are finishing up and police are documenting the damage and taking reports. A commission from the central administration is also on site, accepting claims from residents regarding their damaged property. Furthermore, charitable organizations are handing out materials to temporarily board up the windows that were blown out.
The blast wave also damaged windows in several neighboring apartment buildings. After the cleanup, a special commission will determine if these apartments are still habitable. Natalia Husak, Volodymyr Shtengelov from Dnipro for the Freedom TV channel.
On the front lines, 158 combat engagements occurred over the past day. This was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The most difficult situation remains in the Pokrovsk direction. There, Ukraine's defense forces repelled 44 attacks by Russian occupiers. In the Kostiantinovka direction, another 16, and in the Hulyapole direction, 17. Russians also tried to break through the AFU defenses in the Oleksandrivka, Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, and Lyman sectors. Ukrainian defenders repelled all attacks by the invaders. 1,210 Russian military personnel were eliminated by Ukraine's defense forces over the past day. Thus, Russia's total losses since the start of the full-scale war already exceed 1,292,000 soldiers. This is also stated in the report of the General Staff of the AFU. In addition, Ukrainian forces destroyed a Russian tank, 4 armored vehicles, 49 artillery systems, and 2 MLRS yesterday. The Russian army will also be missing another air defense system, as well as over 200 units of vehicles and special equipment. Ukraine sees no readiness from the Russian Federation to end the war and insists on increasing pressure on Moscow. At the same time, the United States believes that Putin is supposedly seeking peace. President Volodymyr Zelensky said this in an interview with Le Monde.
On one hand, it's no big deal. It's normal to have different views. But on the other hand, when we want the war to end, to speed up this process, we raise the issue of pressure on Russia. We know that Putin does not want to end the war. We are asking for additional pressure so that he will want to. America believes that he wants it, and why apply extra pressure if Russia shows that it is also ready for peace? There are different views on certain things, and we need to work on that. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, in an interview with Le Monde.
The president of Ukraine also noted that global sanctions pressure on Russia is decreasing, so Kiev is forced to use its own methods to deter the aggressor. Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine will respond to every Russian strike.
Unlike everyone, or many in the world, Ukraine has its own sanctions, long-range capabilities. The Russians must feel the pressure. If Ukraine doesn't respond to their strikes, Russia will just keep the war going and won't even think about pauses. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, in an interview with Reuters.